the Evolution Security Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the EvoSec podcast. You've got the tactical twins here, Eric and Aaron Davis. We've got a fun episode here with a gentleman named Kirk Clark. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Doing good. Now, people in the training circuit in the United States know you really well. But then there's the fact is that you kind of purposely stay under the radar. But, you know, if there is a training junkie definition in a dictionary, there's going to be your picture right next to it.
If ever in the DSMV, it'll be there too. So
Awesome. Well, so to give a little bit of credence to that, I'm going to quote someone here. Kirk is going straight to hell because he has sold his soul to the devil to shoot that well. And that is the great comedian / world-class instructor, Tom Givens. I'd say that's a pretty good accolade right there, getting that from Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Tom is fantastic. He's a huge part of my CV is my training with Tom. And not only is he a fantastic instructor, but he's a great wordsmith and, you know, very pithy and entertaining in his own way.
Most
yes,
definitely.
Some of the most fun we have is listening to Tom and his comments and jokes.
Oh, yeah. Keeps you, and he does it purposely, too. He does it to keep everybody enthralled. Well, Kirk, I'm going to give off some accolades to kind of explain where you're coming from since, you know, unfortunately for some of us, you do try and stay under the radar. But now, so you are a master class USPSA shooter in carry optics. You're still challenge grandmaster in carry optics and production. You're an IDPA master in multiple divisions. Now, you are 5-time Rangemaster Tactical Conference champion, which that's kind of timely since we're all going to get to hang out here in about a month. Looking forward to that. Now, you have 4 perfect 125 scores at the Rogers Shooting School test from concealment. And another thing to note about that is the exact same number of perfect scores that Bill Rogers himself has. So that's pretty cool. You've got 2 Modern Samurai Project black belt patches, and you've got 3 Gabe White turbo pins. You've got fast coin number 22 from Ernest Langdon, who has carried the torch for Todd Lewis Green on the fast coin. Also, your Gunsight 250 expert ticket. And lastly, you are a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt.
Oh, yeah.
And now
not a good one, but I am a purple belt.
We don't believe that.
I don't try to pass guard. I just do leg locks, bro. It's I know it's not good. I disappoint Cecil every time I step on the mats, but
and I bet you he gives you a hard time too. He doesn't hold back.
Well, and it hurts because he can beat me up. So whether it's a verbal or physical beating, I'm in trouble. So.
Well, Cecil's another good dude. Well, so I did want to mention this too. Back in the first time I met you was back in January 2016, where we took the Establishing Dominance Paradigm class, which those in the audience that might know this, but it is actually a really cool class that was taught only a few times by Tom Givens, Craig Douglas, and the late, great, amazing Dr. William April. So it was an honor to be able to take that class. And it was a blast taking it with you because you were my relay mate during the shooting portions. And one thing that stuck out to me was how great of a shooter you were, but also very encouraging to me and very humble. So
I
just want to,
appreciate that. It was great to share a line with you. And honestly, EDP is one of the best courses I've ever taken, and I've taken a lot. So it was really cool that we got to share that experience together because it really was a very unique offering in the training space.
most definitely. Now, I think it'd be fun to go a little bit further back, not just start with your current high shooting skills and discipline and training, etc. I think it'd be cool to ask you, whereabouts you grew up and what life was like, what you did when you were younger, and how it all led to you becoming this high level shooter and training junkie and martial artist.
So I grew up in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, about 5 minutes from Reynosa, Mexico, and about an hour from the Gulf of Mexico. And growing up, I had pretty severe asthma, so I was not a very athletic kid in any way, shape, or form. I was always more of a book nerd. And as I got into my teens, my dad would go out to the deer lease and he would take us, hunting. And honestly, hunting's never really done much for me. But I like going out spending the weekend with my dad. So one weekend, he just happens to bring out the family pistol collection, which at the time was like 5 pistols. Notably, a SIG 226 and a Colt Combat Commander were in there. And we went and shot those just as paper targets on, the berm where you zero your hunting rifles. And for some reason, some part of my brain just clicked like, yep, that's your thing. That's what you're into. You need more of this. This is really cool. And so, he was very excited that I wanted to do something outdoors. So he was my dad was always more of a jock. And so he fully encouraged me getting into shooting and spending time with it. And so I did a little bit of USPSA. Unfortunately, I let the gun magazines talk me out of it because I was going to get killed in the streets. So, I didn't take it too seriously. And then I met up with a gentleman named Jim Neestet. Jim Neestet is a former special operations guy, and he was running some shooting schools down here. And my dad hooked me up with him, and I trained with him for several years. Eventually ended up doing some assistant instructor work for him for a while. And so basically I started shooting with someone of that caliber when I was about like 14, 15. And so it was a very early start. And, I was pretty good. I didn't really shoot any matches or anything because, I had the wrong ideas on that. But that was a fantastic foundation for my shooting where I just kind of started off at.
Well, so you said you started that at 14, and when did you get back into competition?
Man, like 2019, 18 maybe, 18,
Wow.
19. I didn't touch it at all. Like I'd already won two TacCons and some turbo pins and stuff before I started shooting matches. I think it was just I got not to be grandiose, but I got to be about as good as I think you can get just doing shooting classes and practice. And I knew that to get to that next skill level, because I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, I knew that to get there, I'd have to start shooting matches. And that's what got me into USPSA and Steel Challenge, then more recently IDPA.
We
Eric?
still got you. Yep.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead,
here.
Aaron.
So, okay, so I can ask this. We're having some goofy issues here, Eric. I'm sorry, bro.
That's okay, Aaron.
So, Kirk, obviously though, you've got a high propensity for discipline. Can you kind of maybe give some insight into that? Because of course that's where people get great or good. There is, I think that a lot of people try and deny that there's natural talent. They'll say there's no natural talent. Well, I kind of agree with that, but it's actually what there is mental
Yeah, well, I mean, I was actually just talking to my brother about this. There's a I think a Schopenhauer quote where he talks about, excellence is hitting a target others can't hit. Genius is hitting a target that others don't see. You know what I mean? And like, I think for me, and I'm not that, just by the way, like Ben Steger is that, people like that are that. But for me, it was simply that this was the first like thing I did that was like measurable, that I was particularly good at. And, if anyone tells you that you're going to like broccoli your way into getting good at something, I have trouble believing that, because I think at some point you have to enjoy it or get some kind of like ego validation or something out of it that's going to push you to work those long hours and work hard enough to get really good at it. And I know for me, I think part of the draw when I was a kid was, okay, wow, I'm, because I learned right from the first time. I didn't have to unlearn anything, right? And so I got to be pretty good pretty quick because I didn't have to unlearn wrong stuff. And so I think just the appeal of, oh, wow, I'm good at this. And, when you're 15 years old, hanging out with special forces dudes, like, dude, I mean, you're not going to do anything cooler than that. I mean, who cares what the football team's doing? That's pretty cool. And so I think just a mixture of the environment was really, interesting. And, I was good at it pretty quickly. And there's just, you enjoy doing things you're good at. But then you want to get better and better and better, or some people do. And that joy sparks the desire to do the kind of hard work you need to do to progress. Because I mean, I can't even estimate how much dry fire I even did in my teens. It was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours of dry fire. Like, I didn't shoot that much, but I dry fired every day.
Yeah,
And I don't think you're going to do that unless you're getting something out of it. Like, I can't shame someone into doing the work. I don't think that's a thing that can really be done, right?
Well, Kirk, that actually segues really well into my next question. I mean, you hit on dry fire. You hit on the fact that you met a special forces veteran that helped you. I mean, at 14, I'm number one. I wish that Aaron and I would have had that opportunity at that young age. But one of the things that we keyed in on is that you mentioned dry firing, thousands of hours. What about as far as how you dry fired, specific, routines that you might have had? Was there books that you found that aided you with that? And also talk about your average, live fire, weekly, 2 times a week, so on and so forth. Hit on your baseline training regiment through the
So
years, I
when I
should
was a
say.
young guy, when I was first starting, when I was a teen or whatever, and the years I shot, it was very primitive. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I just knew you should do dry fire. So what I lacked in sophistication, I made up for and just wrote time, like how much time I spent doing it. I would just put on a movie and I would just do, okay, I'm going to do reloads for this whole movie until my arms can't do it anymore. And then I'll take a break, then I'll start again. And that's something a lot of people get wrong. Like, if you can dry fire for 2 hours, you're not moving fast enough. You're not holding the gun hard enough. You're not pressing the trigger hard enough. Like, you should be kind of sweaty and gross if you're
Agreed.
doing an hour of dry fire, right? Like, if you look pristine at the other side of it, you've probably been training yourself wrong. You've been training yourself to undergrip the pistol, to press the trigger too slowly, like slower than you would in real life, stuff like that. But I got really good at my weapons manipulation and my draw speed and things like that just from doing a ton of rote dry fire, like kind of mindless dry fire. Then there were a couple of years I was really busy in school and I didn't shoot. And then in grad school, I didn't shoot at all. I just kind of shot in the summers and did a lot of shooting classes in the summers. And over the years, my dry fire became much more refined because, like, I got to going to Rogers the first couple times and I went in blind. I didn't study for the test. I just wanted to see what I could do. And then I got frustrated because I was almost beating the test. And so then I started really working at it. And so what I started doing was around that same time, I started shooting with Ben Steger once a year when he comes by to Texas. And so I would shoot with Ben in Austin basically every February. And he's the guy that really taught me, what I think of as dry fire now, right? And even then, a lot of his dry fire stuff is really based on like mimicking parts of USPSA stages. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've never really done a lot of that. But like, I put together, like, I guess what he does technically and kind of put it into my own kind of like paradigm with, okay, what are the kind of things you do at TacCon? What are the kind of things you do at Rogers? What are the things you need to do for a turbo pin, for, black belt patch, whatever. And then I would break those down using his methodologies of, like, let's say the draw, like half my draws are just to count one, and then the other half will be count one to extension. And then I'm only pressing the trigger 10% of the time. Like, I very rarely press the trigger after a draw. There's tactical and technical reasons for that. But I really broke it down to be much more sophisticated. Like, before I went into Rogers 2021, which was the year I got 3 perfect scores in a week, that year, the 3 months leading up to it, I did a black belt patch. I shot with Stagger. I did TacCon. That was the year I did double gold to TacCon. And then for that 3 months before Rogers was the real prize. That was the one I was really trying to go for. And I was doing an hour a day of dry fire, shooting a club match, 1 to 2 club matches a week. And I was doing an 4-hour half day of live fire once a week for the entire 3 month leading up to that. And that's what it takes for me at my skill level to produce those kind of results. I mean, for more talented people, they would need less. For less talented people, they would need more. You know what I mean? Which that sounds like a lot, but when I talked to Ben about it, I was talking about, I might make a run for GM or whatever, a few years back. And he was like, well, how much can you shoot? And I was asking him, like, how much shooting do I need to do to really be competitive at high level matches? And he's like, well, how many times a day can you shoot? And I was like, no, I can shoot a club match once a week, and I can do a live fire practice once a week. And that's the only thing I can get done. I got a full-time job, man. I just can't. Right. And he was like, well, it's going to be hard.
Yeah,
And,
that sounds like Ben.
So there's levels to this, right? If you want to get at Ben's level, you got to do a lot more than I've done. Right. But, Ben's a much better shooter. But within the kind of tactical, self-defensive, concealed carry, realistic, quasi-realistic scenarios kind of stuff, I'm very confident that I'll put in a good showing, not guaranteed win or anything, but a good showing against anybody, even someone that's a better shooter than I am, because all my USPSA matches are from concealment. All my IDPAs obviously from concealment. Steel Challenge, my Renegade matches are all from concealment. I only shoot open when I'm required to in Steel Challenge and real matches. And so I'm very familiar with what can go wrong from concealed carry and using actual carry guns and gear and stuff you'll actually carry in real life versus just, match equipment from USPSA gear, right?
Let's take a minute to talk about our sponsor, Origin. Origin is growing and expanding exponentially, making all their products in the USA without compromise. Of course, they make the best jiu-jitsu gis on the planet, no question. But they have products for the everyday person. Check out their 100-kilo hoodies. I've been wearing my Path hoodie almost nonstop, and Aaron loves his new zip-up version of the kilo hoodie. Both are unparalleled in warmth, stitching, and quality. Need blue jeans? Check out the Delta 68 jeans. Strong yet soft and super stretchy. Made of a cotton poly spandex blend, which is light and stays cool and dry. These jeans are named after the brave Mekong Delta Navy SEALs who traded their issue uniform pants for tougher denim blue jeans to get the mission done. Origin has also disrupted the hunting industry with their new line of nano-wool base layers, body lock, stow jackets, and their Novalock insulated jackets, all in the new innovative Raptor camo. If you need jiu-jitsu gis, Jocko supplements, or any of the products mentioned, go to our show notes and click on the affiliate link and use EvoSec10 at checkout. Now back to the show. Well, and Kurt, something recently just happened in my life that has been super beneficial for my shooting, and we don't know each other very well, but I am a veteran, an Army veteran. So when I joined the Army back in 2000, that started a realm in my life where I was in and out of good places to train. depending on where I was stationed or sometimes being overseas, of course, I couldn't, live fire. Now, my time over in Korea and my deployments to, the sandbox, Iraq, so on and so forth, I would dry fire. Dry fire nearly every day, and that made a huge difference. But I say that to say this: I'm outside of Fort Bragg now as a civilian now, and I had been on a waiting list for over a year and a half for a range here. And the beauty about this range is that it's only 15 minutes from my house, and it's a private range with only 200 members. And so about the last 5 weeks, I've shot once a week, every week. And every single time I've had my own space there. So
That's
again,
huge.
I really have, in my opinion, I've suffered a little bit over the last 20 years because I just hadn't had a real good place to train, frankly. And
No, dude, I feel you. Like there were years in there. Because I mean, I've been shooting really since the year 2000, about the same time as you. And there were times in there that, I had access to great facilities. And there are times in there that I just had rinky dink, no more than 1 round per second, having 11-year-olds point shotguns at your face, indoor ranges. And, I've had to try to make do with what I could get. But what's cool is dry fire. Even if you can't have a gun, even if you just get a blue gun, you can still get a lot of value out of that. And so you're never really completely out of it as long as you have some means to perform some dry fire, right?
yeah, and incidentally, I bring this story up every now and then just because it's not near to this, some of your accolades, but it did mean something to me back when I went over to Korea in 2002. And I was like, man, I gotta find some way to practice. And I went down on the economy and found a cheap ass airsoft Glock.
Yep.
And I had my wife mail me my holster and mag pouch. And I dry fire with that every day. And then when I returned home, not having fired a live round, Aaron and I took Mike Brown's the Presidium group. I think they called that class tactical speed shooting. Real good class, and I ended up shooting the top of that class. And the only reason I bring that up, again, not being braggadocious, is it was the dry fire.
For sure. Like if you dry fire every day, you're going to outshoot the guy that live fires even once a week, in my opinion, if you're doing quality dry fire. I mean, really, for me, live fire is more of it's a BS test. It's, have I been being honest with myself in my dry fire? That's what my live fire teaches me, is like, if I go out and I'm crushing all my times in dry fire and feeling really good about myself, and I go to the range and I run my standards and I'm just falling apart, I'm like, man, I've been phoning it in on the dry fire, right? I haven't been doing it. But if I've been doing it, let's say, well, maybe I wasn't gripping the gun hard enough. Maybe I wasn't pulling the trigger hard enough. Maybe I wasn't, having enough discipline on what's happening with my dot or my irons or whatever. And so for me, live fire is about recoil control and validation, really, as much as anything, of your dry fire.
Yeah, that's well said. And you mentioned Ben. I don't know if you can see this here,
Oh, yeah.
but Ben Stoker's book, and Annette Evans. We become a friend of hers from afar. We're looking forward to meeting up. Where, by the way, on the air, congratulations, Annette, on your purple belt. Excellent job.
Good job, Annette. No, Annette's awesome.
So her book, and then hearing Ben and his book, one of the things that I had not done, and I'm certainly not trying to make this about me at all. I just think it adds to your point. Up to this point, I had done decently well, Aaron as well. I never pushed myself to real failure in dry fire. It wasn't until Ben Stoker's book and then Annette's book that I realized, man, I'm not pushing myself to failure in dry fire. Can you talk about that? Is that something that you push yourself to failure, and can you hit on that if that's something that's important to you?
Well, I think part of that is you have to look at the training paradigm you're under, right? You're looking at when you look at most like military and law enforcement paradigms, there'll be some sort of qual, and the qual is like a pass fail. Like you need X score to pass. If you don't hit that score or within time, then you fail, right? Whereas competitive shooting is based on hit factor. It's generally, like how fast can you harvest as many points as possible, right? And so in hit factor, there's no top of the pyramid. You can always be faster or more accurate, or even if you have 100% accuracy, well, then go do it faster, right? Whereas if you're shooting to, like, let's say a qual, well, the guy that barely squeaks in and the guy that's done before everyone else with like all the bullets in the same hole, they both get an even score, like 300 out of 300 or whatever, right? So I think just coming from that competitive shooting background where, you and the other best guys are all within 0.1% of each other. Like it's not like one of you is way better than everyone else. Man, you really start to try to push that little like, hey, I got 0.100% better. Yeah, that might be enough, especially over the course of like a major USPSA match with like, 20 stages or whatever. Like, yeah, if you're 0.5% better, that's huge. So I think just that background of the competitive shooting stuff really informs that you're never done. You're never, okay, I'm good enough, right? Like if you're trying to be competitive, the other guys aren't going to stop. So you just got to keep pushing, right? And so I think it is really important in training to have times when you are pushing to failure. I mean, now just like you'll talk to Ben, you talk to anyone in that world, they'll tell you there's like practice mode and match mode. And in practice mode, I'm going as hard as I can. In match mode, I'm trying to shoot about 95% of my potential because I'm trying not to make big mistakes, right? Like I'm trying to shoot pretty close to my ability without screwing stuff up. But you can modulate that, right? Because, for example, in the last year's TacCon shoot off, I was shooting against a much better shooter than I am. And I was able to modulate that because I looked over and saw I was shooting against. I'm like, all right, this guy's just a better shooter than I am. My only chance of winning this is letting it all hang out and going that 100%. And I may go off the rails and not do it. But if I play it safe, I'm going to lose here. And so having that ability to kind of like turn that rheostat for the task at hand, you know what I mean? Like that's important. And I think you can only ever get there if you know what that feels like. And you can only know what that feels like if you know, all right, this is just, I'm going to crazy town. I'm off the rails. Okay, this is me at my max potential where I can actually hit it, but it's unpredictable. I'm going to miss a lot. And then, all right, here, let me pull that back just enough where I'm 95% of there, but I'm going to get it almost every time, right? And so you can't do that unless you know what failing feels like, unless you know what 100% feels like, unless you know what almost 100% feels like. So I think you hit on a very important point. I think it's very important to have a space in your training where you can fail or you can push further than you can control it. Like I dropped a Boresight Glock with an SRO on it and shattered the glass because I was drawing so fast the gun flew out of my hands. Right. That's how fast I'm pushing in dry fire. Sometimes
Well,
will I ever draw that way in a fight or in like a match or something? No, it's not appropriate. But you don't know what appropriate is unless you've kind of gone past it in training in a safe environment.
well, Kirk, I did want to interject that the time passed where I could say it earlier, but we were talking about Annette Evans and we were talking about dry fire, and she simply asked, "So have you thrown a gun across the room yet?"
Yep.
So there you go.
It's true. If you haven't tossed a gun, you're not dry firing hard enough.
Man, I'm gonna have to dry fire with my 40,000 round Glock 17 that doesn't
Pick
have a
the one you
finish
like the
on it.
least. Like
Yeah.
that's your dry fire gun. I think Gabe White's killed a couple Glock 17s via dry fire alone. So, there's higher levels than me out there if you want to get to it.
So audience, listen very close. If you want to get serious about dry fire, grab a gun you don't care about and make sure at some point. Now, honestly, don't just throw a gun because you think it'd be cool. Dry fire so hard you're going to throw it, you're getting somewhere.
That's like tearing up your ears to get cauliflower ear, like just so you can get it. You know what I mean? It's not a good look. Don't do it.
Yeah. But if you go fast enough to really throw it, man, that's an honor.
Yeah, and I think to close up this point, I think that's what we're getting at, and is a good reminder for myself and likely Aaron, is that, man, you got to push way harder than you think you should, and this is a good cue for myself. Is, you know,
If you so when I would do my like hour of dry fire getting ready for Rogers, it'd be a mix of like fundamentals like draws, reloads, one-handed reloads, that kind of stuff. The stuff you'll do at Rogers. A mix of I have like a giant printed out Rogers range with all the targets up, so I just I'm shooting the course of fire, right? And then I would just do stuff where I do like, hey, draw, fire, reloads while I'm walking around the kitchen island. You know what I mean? Like whatever. It's just I'd mix it up, do different things different times. I don't try to like perfectly replicate what I'm trying to do until like really a couple days before, whatever I'm going for. I try to like have a very robust and varied set of things I'm capable of in dry fire. Other people have other approaches. Gabe White's approach is different. He'll just zero in on exactly what he's doing and try to do it as many times as possible. Both can work. I really think a lot of it is like trial and error and seeing what works for you, because we're all very different. Like I would tell you, the first time I took Gabe's class was about 2016. And it was me, him, and Spencer Keepers. And he was giving his lecture on vision, which is very good because Gabe probably has the most sophisticated understanding of vision for shooting of any of the tactical guys. And Gabe had me and Spencer talk about how we see things. So back then, this is, we're all using irons. And the way Gabe, Spencer Keepers, and myself used our vision for shooting, we're all different. We're all doing different things with our eyes, and we're all within 1% of each other any given Tuesday. So you know what I mean? I think a lot of it is like you need to learn the standards. You need to learn like the typical way. Like I was watching this documentary on Green Berets a long time ago, and one of the quotes that stuck with me was, "You have to be conventional before you can be unconventional." And I think that's really true. You need to learn the basics, but once you learn the basics, then you have to kind of like develop your own style and what works for you and what works. Now, what works for me is like good enough for me. That's usually BS. It means they never test themselves. The way you find out what works for you is you test yourself over and over, and you see, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? How am I doing relative to my peers or objective standards or whatever? And so that's how you keep yourself honest in that versus it being just, a reservoir to pull excuses from, right? But I do think it's important to really try stuff out and see what works for you, man. Because the way I dry fire might not work for you. Gabe's might be better. But maybe you've been doing Gabe's and you're not getting what you want. Come try how I do it. That might be a better fit for you and just your psychology and how you work and all that kind of stuff.
well, Kirk, kind of closing out some of the because we got more shooting stuff to discuss here in a second, but I think our audience would be a little irritated if I didn't press the live fire piece. Do you also have a home range that you can pretty much do whatever you want to do? You talked about shooting at least once a week. Do you have a home range like that you can really push hard, and what's a typical session look like for you?
There were years and years. The majority of my shooting career, I have not had access to a real range. I just haven't. In the last 4 or 5 years, I have. There is a good range, half an hour from my house. And so I'll go out there on a Sunday. Now, lately, I've not been shooting much. I've kind of been putting other things in the front seat. But what I'll do for just a practice session, if I'm getting ready for something or just general maintenance, I tend to like 3 to 4 hours is kind of good for me. And for me, I'll usually crank through, depending on what I'm trying to do, 300 to 500 rounds in that kind of time. I mean, less if I'm just working precision or something, like just that's lower round count. But again, in live fire, I'm really trying to work recoil control, and by necessity, recoil control stuff is ammo intensive. It just kind of is. It's doubles and build drills and casino drills and the kind of stuff like that. All the permutations of the advanced super test and stuff like that is all really good. So by necessity, the kind of stuff I do in live fire is ammunition intensive, right? I think live fire is super important because, again, it's how you validate dry fire. I don't really believe in using matches as practice per se. I mean, at a certain level when you're first starting, you can look at them that way. But I look at like a club match as like a pop quiz. It's like, how are we doing today? How can I do trying to win? How can I do against the other guys, right? Like my local heat. Because wherever you're at, you'll have a local guy that's pretty close to you and like, okay, did I beat him this week or did he beat me or, whatever. And I think live fire is super important. I think just you practicing on your own live fire is important. At my range, Coyote Arms in Edinburgh, Texas, if you're ever out there, come say hi.
Cool.
When you're out there, you can draw from a holster, you can do your own stuff, you have your own private bay, and I find that to be the ideal place is where you have your own bay and you're not getting babysat, and you can just kind of work your own stuff within reason. I mean, if you start doing anything too crazy, the guy in the golf cart will come up. But for the most part, you can just kind of do your thing. And I find that to be very conducive. I don't like training all day. I really think that past about 3 hours, maybe 4, you're not doing much. I mean, you're getting tired. And I guess I could do that, but jiu-jitsu is a better way to do that. So, I don't really believe in shooting too much because most of the adult learning research I've seen is, people can focus for about 45 minutes if they're unusually disciplined. And so if you're just making yourself stay out there 8, 10, 12 hours, you'd probably be better served going home, like having a beer, watching a movie, decompressing, and then hitting again tomorrow, right? So I really
Kind of
try not
a
to
diminishing
overtrain.
returns kind of thing, right?
For sure. I think
At some point.
you want to test yourself when you're diminished. I think for sure. I think testing yourself when you're tired, that's the reason Rogers is so hard. Is Rogers is 2,500 rounds in 4.5 days. You run the test 6 times. The test itself is 125 hits required. It's a marathon. It's not, like for example, versus let's say like the fast test. Fast test is really hard, right? But it's over in 5 minutes, right? The Rogers test it's long, and so by the 5th day, most people's scores are really falling apart by Friday, and because people are just exhausted. And I think it's very important if you're doing this from a defensive perspective. How do I shoot when I'm tired? How do I shoot when I'm hungover? How do I shoot early in the morning and late at night and like whatever? How do I shoot after I just got murdered at jiu-jitsu all week, did 10 sessions this week, and then I went shot a match the next day, right? How do you shoot under those conditions? You need to know that, but I don't think that's a place, especially civilian shooters, we need to put a ton of time in, because you'll be diminished. Like right now I'm on crutches because I have a jiu-jitsu injury, you know what I mean? So like life will throw problems at you, but don't stop shooting because you're on crutches. Don't stop going to jiu-jitsu because your arm's in a sling. Just figure it out, like work through it, see how you do.
Well, Kirk, I think that's a perfect segue. And I'll frame this next question this way. I have started to relent, over the years, we're like, hey, you gotta, have this solid lifting program, which is great.
Yeah.
We believe in that. You should have all of these, you get the medical, you've got, of course, jiu-jitsu, you got boxing, you got wrestling, you got, of course, shooting and all the other aspects of being a solid, having a solid defensive paradigm. That said, it's like at one point, some people and most people will get overwhelmed and get burnt out, unless you're specifically working towards some particular goal, if it be competition, if it be, a jiu-jitsu tournament, so on and so forth, where a lot of that comes into play. Now, I've started to say, if we can just get people just to do jiu-jitsu and just have a solid shooting platform, everything else, kind of comes together. You should go to ECQC, all those things as well. But as long as people focus on jiu-jitsu and also have a solid shooting training program, that they're probably going to be doing okay. And would you agree with that, first off?
If you're a BJJ blue belt and like strong, solid B class and USPSA, you are literally John Wick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And no disrespect to the people who do it for real, cops, personal protection, people like that. They're doing real stuff that's very important and has a very different dynamic, that dynamic of personal risk, right? But as far as technical skill goes, I mean, just look at, the worst guy at ADCC versus the best guy at the local, whatever the local law enforcement agency is. The worst guy at ADCC is going to be really, really good, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when you look at what do we do as just normal people, I think being physically fit is important because it's a key part of mental health. It's a key part of just having a life that's pleasant. And I think what that means is really individual, right? Like your fitness goal may be, hey, can I walk for a mile? Great, work at that. Your fitness goal may be, hey, I want to get my brown belt. Great, work at that. I'm not as judgmental, because like I agree with you. Like I come up with an ideal program. You need to find a town where you have world-class USPSA shooters, where you have access to frequent, Shivworks and Roger Shooting School and kind of stuff. And you have an Olympic lifting gym and a combat sambo club and a savate club. That might be the perfect apex predator dude, right?
Yeah.
Good luck. I don't think there's a place you can do all those things, And so for most of us, the best we're going to get is, IDPA, USPSA, and then jujitsu / any of the the combat sports that actually, I struggle to say martial arts because a lot of martial arts are pretty bogus, but like the combat sports, that's Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, sambo, judo, whatever. Any one of those is good, and I really think once you covered those bases as just an average guy, you've done, and you supplement that with the stuff you learn in classes like medical and force on force and illegal and that kind of stuff is really important to work, I think, in that training scenario because you can handle a lot of your fitness and shooting stuff with USPSA, dry fire, and jiu-jitsu club.
Yep.
So for
Yeah.
me, it's more like, how do you make this stuff serve you? Because at the end of the day, are you doing it like your motive becomes very important as far as how much work is worth it? Because yeah, you can just put more and more and more, but like, is your wife happy to see you when you get home? Are your kids doing good in school? like these things really matter, and they're like, and I feel like some people just want to like throw all their time and effort and eggs into this world, and this world's super important. But for me, as like an average Joe, not as a law enforcement, military guy, for me, this is about, hey, if anything bad ever happens, can I protect myself and my people? That's what this is about. If I'm abandoning myself and my people to spend all this time protecting it, like it doesn't make sense. It's like you're
It's
turning
not worth
yourself
it.
into North Korea at a certain point. We have this huge military, no running water, right? It's all defense and nothing else. And like I don't think that's the right answer for normal people either. So I agree with you. I can come up with like, how do we build Todd, right?
Yep.
But in real life, like if you got a really good like judo school next to you, there's no jujitsu, there's no USPSA, but there's Steel Challenge. Well, man, judo and Steel Challenge, you're going to be real tough. Like you're going to be a tough dude in a couple of years, right?
Oh yeah.
And so to me, I get less wrapped up in the details of like what fight sport or what shooting sport. Like do one. I mean, get me wrong. Like if you're doing Aikido and bullseye, maybe we need to prioritize that a little bit. But if
Aikido
you're
and
doing anything that's
PPC.
real, that's where you get your hours, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Kirk. So, what started your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey? Was there a major catalyst? Tell us how you started Jiu-Jitsu. What caused you to start it as well?
So when I was young in high school, I did like maybe a couple months of judo for a little bit. Didn't really stick with it. It was fun. I liked it. Of course, it's hard. Judo's brutally
Oh
hard.
yeah.
And it's tough on your body too. And did it for a little bit, just didn't stick with it. Got a girlfriend, stopped going, right? Like everyone. And so flash forward to about 2010, 11, my younger brother is going to some jiu-jitsu clubs. And this is back when jiu-jitsu was like in its infancy in my area. There was like a black belt and he lived like 2 hours away. And there was a couple purple belts and those guys were like gods. And so I went to a couple classes with him. I didn't really stick with it. Went off to grad school, got busy, was too busy in grad school to do anything. But then I went to grad school in Santa Fe at St. John's College. And when I came back to South Texas, I was like, hey, I've always wanted to get serious about this martial arts stuff, so I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do, right? I want to stick with it. Because where I realized it was important was in 2011. In 2011, I went to my very first ECQC, I think May 2011. And for the month before that, I'd done a couple classes with my younger brother, and I was like, you know what, this ECQC thing seems pretty tough. I was going because Paul Gomez sent me. Paul Gomez told
Oh,
me I needed
nice.
it. So that's how I heard about it. And so Paul told me to go. So I'm like, well, I should do jujitsu a little bit before I go there. That would be smart. So I went like 2 days a week for like a month before I went there, just as like a get warmed up. And with 2 days a week for a month of jujitsu against like the normal people there, I was whooping up on them. And back then I was like a really big kind of overweight dude. And I was still using like 0 stripe white belt jujitsu effectively against people that didn't know anything. Right now, the guys that knew stuff, like I met several lifelong friends in that class. I met Phil Stuntz in that class. I met Dr. Vu Tran and Justin Anderson in that class. And Vu is a badass OG martial artist. And at the time, Vu was a brown belt, but he's like the world's worst sandbagger, so he's not really a brown belt. And no, he's a purple, but even then he was a sandbagger. And him and his buddy Justin, who's a blue belt at the time, they were just running through these guys that worked corrections. There was some like Navy SWIC guy there, and these like just like roidy, manly men. And these 2 little scrawny 170-pound dudes were just tooling them. And, my 1 month of jujitsu was working fine against the normal people. The tough guys were beating me up, right? And of course, Justin and Vu were murdering me. And I just saw it work. I saw it be effective. And these guys were not handgun experts. I mean, Justin, it was his first live fire class, and he was just tearing people up as a blue belt, right? And so I saw it work. It wasn't theoretical. It wasn't, oh, well, I'll snatch the grasshopper and that. Like, it was just, no, they're just beating these guys up like in real time in front of me. And I was like, okay, well, this seems highly effective. And so I meant to get around to it, did a couple more ECQCs, didn't take it seriously. But at the end of grad school, when I was coming back to South Texas, I was like, all right, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to train. And so I started training in 2014, and I've been training since. I took 2 years off for COVID. I got my purple belt the week of lockdowns, didn't train for 2.5 years. And then because my dad was elderly, I didn't want to get him sick. And but my dad passed last year, so not long after that, I started training again. So I started training about half of last year, and I've been back at it. So that's been my kind of journey. I started under Louis Rubalcava as my first black belt. He's out in Arkansas now. A really good guy. Back then he was a purple belt, but he won Pan Am, so he's really good.
Nice.
He won Pan Am's adult purple belt, in his weight class, which is heavyweight,
That's
I think.
legit.
So, he's good, and he's a good coach. And then he left Arkansas, and his right-hand guy, Stefan Perez, took over, and I got my blue and my purple from Stefan. And now I train with Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's a lightweight in the UFC, very good black belt, very good MMA fighter, just
very much
well-rounded
know
martial
him.
artist.
Yeah.
And,
Awesome.
but I the cool thing about the RGV, Rio Grande Valley, like jiu-jitsu culture is there's not a lot of like, well, you can't go train there. They're the wrong association. Everyone trains with everyone down here. So I go to all sorts of open mats. I do morning classes like in another school because they have morning classes and stuff. So like I make my way around the local circuit. But my coach is Carlos Diego Ferreira.
Nice. I really didn't know about your background, but because you were a shooter, I wondered if some of that catalyst was possibly ECQC. That's a cool story.
Oh, dude. I
yeah,
got
Paul,
tooled. I saw tough guys get tooled by jiu-jitsu guys.
yeah.
So I was just like, oh, so this clearly works. Need more of this in my life. And so when I had the time to do it, I just pushed on it and made it a thing.
Well, and Paul Gomez is the reason that all of us have been able to even attend any of Shivworks or Craig Douglas's classes, especially ECQC. So, yeah, Paul, we owe a great debt to him. May he rest in peace. I actually
Paul was an amazing guy.
Yeah, he was, and I actually had the opportunity. I took fighting rifle at Tactical Response. Shoot, what was that? 2007, and he was kind of hanging around, being Paul, being kind of that training gnome, just roaming around. And he was kind of helping out at Tactical Response during that period of time. So I got to hang out with him
That's
for the
where I
week,
met
and I
him.
was
Me and Buddy, we went and did fighting pistol, the fight, and immediate action medicals, like 6 days, just back to back to back. And he was my instructor for like half of that. And just hanging out in the team room with him, he was carrying a knife forward to the hips and appendix carry and all the stuff I'd only read about on the internet. And, I just kind of bonded with him. And I asked him, where do I need to go? And he's like, you need to go to ECQC and you need to go to Rogers Shooting School. And so I listened to him, and that advice changed my life, right? I became a martial artist because of that advice. And, Rogers is where I gained, in my opinion, the hardest thing I've ever done in shooting is perfect score with the Rogers shooting school test. That's by far the hardest. And so pushing myself to be the kind of shooter that could do that changed, me in a lot of ways, right?
Awesome. Very cool.
Well, so Kirk, now we've heard a little bit, you mentioned going to grad school, and we talked a little bit before the show about some other things you're into lately. Now, just real quick, hit on a couple of other things that besides the shooting world and martial arts that you're into these days.
Well, I'm a big whiskey geek because when I stopped doing jujitsu, I had all this free time. And so the YouTube algorithm served me some like whiskey tribe video, and the guys were entertaining. So I watched more and I watched more, and you're bored because you can't go anywhere. It's the middle of a pandemic. And so I went to the liquor store and tried a couple of bottles, tried a couple more. And then all of a sudden by Christmas 2020, I've got like 80 bottles on the shelf. I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Man.
My liver cannot process all this. So all my friends and family, even grandma, got whiskey that year. I just realized I couldn't. My body's not capable. So I'm a whiskey nerd. I enjoy that. I've done most of the.
So what I know it's a caveat because I won't be able to tell you which one of these are my favorite guitar. I have an idea of maybe one or two, but so what can you say is your favorite whiskey or bourbon? And are you bourbon or Scotch? Both?
I love both. There's no wrong answer. It's just like, there's
okay. What's
there's
the first
beautiful
one
women of
comes
every
to
type
mind?
and shape. There's wonderful whiskey of every, category imaginable, right? And so like for me, I love a good bourbon, but if you're making me pick my true love language, it's a nice peaty Isla Scotch. That is my favorite. Like the Laphroaigs and the Ardbegs, particularly Ardbeg is, one of my favorites, but also, the Port Charlotte products and Bruichladdich and, all that kind of stuff. Although Bruichladdich unpeated. I know someone there just cringed. I know that, guys, but it's the same distillery. Calm down. But
well, Kirk, I think I quote this fairly often. Did you ever hear Benjamin Franklin's take on whiskey?
No, go for it.
So Benjamin Franklin was known to say that whiskey proves that God loves us.
I think he's right because there's just something. And so it was funny because my younger brother has always been very accommodating, and I've been handing him whiskey for years now. And he would always kind of sip on it and just make, that face, that face. And so we were out drinking the other night and we're at a bar. And so I ordered him whiskey and I saw him make that face again. I'm like, look, I want you to listen to me. I want you to sip on that whiskey like you're drinking a really hot cup of coffee. Like just barely let it hit your tongue, barely let it get in there. Like drink it like it's hot, hot, hot coffee. And he did. And he just turned over and he stared at me with his face like, oh my God, this has completely changed the experience. This is so much better. I can taste it. It's not just motor oil anymore. I'm like, well, yeah, dude, like you've been drinking wrong. So if anyone, maybe the shooting stuff doesn't help anyone, but drink your whiskey like it's really hot coffee. It's going to change how you do it. You're going to enjoy it more.
You're bringing up a fun conversation. And FYI, Kirk, this is why we talk about these things. Because, man, we all love shooting, but you know what? You've said a lot of stuff here. You've probably said on other shows. We've said some of the same stuff we say on all of our other shows, but talking about whiskey, music, caviar with Craig Douglas, etc. Now, I really do. There's three things that I think are some of the greatest things on the planet: whiskey, beer, and great espresso. So I'm saying on it to say your love of whiskey, it's something that drives me up the wall is any movie I see or show where someone pours a shot of whiskey and they just shoot it like it's nothing. I was like, man, you just missed out on an opportunity to chill out with some great taste.
I mean, that's what Jameson exists for. Like, if I just want to get rowdy with the bros, yeah, you should shoot back Jameson and drive on. Like they make it. It's called Jameson. If that's how you want to drink, it's cheap and it's pretty good and it'll work. But if you do that with something nice, you're doing that with like Old Owl or something. I'm just like, well, why? Why would you do that though? Like, it doesn't taste any different than the Jameson if you drink it like that. You're just spending, I guess some people buy Van Goghs just so they can burn them. You know what I mean? I guess it's that kind of thing. But like, I don't get it. It's not for me.
Well, awesome. Well, fun. That's really cool. So now let's get to some red meat as we start getting close to the end of the show here, Kirk. So, what is your EDC, man?
So for me, I'm often in professional attire. So, button-up shirt, tucked in, slacks, professional looking belt, not like a gunfighter belt or anything. And so for years and years and years, my setup for that was a Keltec P32 with a laser and a 10-round mag. Oh boy, real high speed, right? The Claude Werner special right there. And, is that a fantastic setup? No, but I could make it work with, what I actually have to wear. And that worked well enough for me. That's a 7-yard gun. Past that, it's not great, but it is a 7-yard gun for me. So, I mean, I felt pretty okay with it. It was better than a sharp stick. And, jiu-jitsu doesn't work great at 7 yards. So, I figured it was something. And the Enigma changed all that. The Filster Enigma just completely, I don't think the Keltec's been out of the safe in years, since I was one of the early adopters of the public run on the Enigma. And I now have I got like a dozen of them. And for different guns, different purposes, different things. But now, honestly, in like office attire, I'll occasionally do a Staccato C, which is a little single stack gun. But normally I'm usually running a SIG 365 XL with a bore sight grip package that he did some mods, kind of how I like it. And for instance, like the magwell, I had him like carve off the magwell on the right side if you're looking down the sights. So that way the part that touches your shirt, the magwell doesn't come out and create an extra point against the t-shirt, right? So I had him shave that off, do his grip, do the humpback, the whole thing. And then it's got a Holosun 47K on it. And that's it. Nothing else is done to it. I do the one with the safety because now I'm shooting single action guns. So I like all my guns to have a thumb safety just because I don't want to be looking for it and it's not there and it confused me or something, right? So really a 365 XL with a Holosun in an Enigma that's a lot of capability in a extremely concealable package. Now, if I'm just wearing, like athleisure or whatever, I'll upgrade to like, let's say Staccato C2, usually with a Holosun 407 on it. And I find Staccato C2, I mean, the problem with the 2011s is they're hard to conceal. It's a lot of gun at the grip, right? And so anything I can do to get a little bit less gun at the grip, I do. And I find the C2 is just enough shorter on the grip that it's a little bit easier to work with. But I've also found that on the C2, like when I was carrying Glocks, I would carry my 48 in an Enigma, but whenever I was carrying like a 17 or something, or 34, I'd carry in a standard holster, typically from Dark Star or Spencer Keepers or Jam Kydex, right? But I found with the Staccatos, I'm really liking the Enigma in general with the Staccatos. I find they're just so big that the Enigma gives you that little bit extra concealability that I find that Staccato and Enigma conceals about as well as a Glock and a Dark Star, right?
Wow.
And so I've found myself becoming more Enigma oriented since switching to single action guns. Now, when I carry single stack single actions, I'll carry in a holster or an Enigma, kind of half and half.
So, number one, you're mentioning what will be. I've got another Glock in the works right now. Hopefully, we'll be finished up sometime soon. We talked about that, Kirk, didn't we? But my next pistol more than likely will be a Staccato C2. I know you got a new Ed Brown 1911.
Yes, I signed up for the AARP and they sent it to me just like that. No, so I don't know. Maybe I know I was dropped once as a child, so I don't know if it's that, but like somehow I've ended up back in the single action world. And so, caveat to your listeners, I don't want someone to be like, "Oh, this guy apparently he shoots good. I needed to go do the single action thing." You do not. You do not. It's a bad idea. The right gun for most people is a Glock. Like I'm just going to say that, right? Of the striker guns, I think the Glock is the best designed. The poor trigger as a safety feature. So like, you know what I mean? I like the Glock. That said, I was struggling. I was having some gun problems this last time at Rogers 2022, and it was very frustrating. And I've also been kind of burned out in shooting. I went so hard in 21 and 22 that I just really kind of like wanted to like take a back seat, spend some more time with my wife, spend some more time at work kind of stuff, and really just kind of like, okay, time for a little break. And so I was at Rogers that year with my crew because I always go out with like, there's the same like 2 or 3 guys. We'll always have different guys coming in and out. And this last year I was with a dear friend of mine named Marcus Klintbaum. And he was there with Vu and Justin, some of those guys we met at that first ECQC, my younger brother. And we were talking about, hey, I was talking about how, I was kind of bored with and upset with my Glocks. And so, I was thinking about switching to 320 because I've got a Legion. They're good guns. I like them. And I was talking to Marcus, and we were just kind of spitballing this at our cabin we'd rented. And after talking through it with some very smart people for a while, I kind of came to the fact that, hey, you know what? I like the single action guns trigger better than any of the non-Glock striker guns. And I like the fact that I have a safety, a thumb safety, and a hammer that, I don't have a gadget, but I have a thumb safety and a hammer, so I can very safely holster these things. Or if I have to carry them in a fanny pack or something, I have a safety, which I really like. So I think these are kind of better street guns and better game guns than some of the super light, short striker guns. And so the only downside, and the downsides going that route versus, let's say, a 320 or a Walther or something like that, or a Canic even, which is, I'm shocked that Canics are really good now, but they are. The disadvantage of going 2011 route or 1911 route is that the guns are just absurdly expensive. One, two, you need to have a pile of them because when something goes wrong, you're usually not rated to fix it yourself, right? I'm not. I wouldn't work on my own gun. And so you need to have a relationship with someone who can help you, or a factory or a maker who you can send it back to them and they'll get it fixed for you. And you have to have enough of them that you can do that. Like, oh, well, this one's out. Well, I got this one, and you can kind of cycle. So like the biggest problem with the single action guns is you're just into a cost factor that's kind of absurd. Like, you know what I mean? Like I just bought a Nighthawk double stack, and that thing I could buy like 9 or 10. I could buy like 9 Glocks for the same price. And and I can do my own work on those and buy my own parts. And it's just, stick with the Glock, guys. I hate to heartbreak everyone, but the Glock's the right answer. I've been doing this for 20 years. I shot stock guns for most of it. I started my career with 1911, so I have a soft spot for them. I mean, you can't see it. My camera's off. I got a 1911 tattoo, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? Like, there's a love language there that, like, it's kind of like a salmon returning home to, the stream, right? And the triggers on them are fantastic. What you gain for all that loss of expense, and you can't work on them yourself, and you can't get a lot of the parts you want, and harder to conceal, all those things are true. Less reliable than a Glock, I'll throw that out there. But what you get for all that,
breaking the internet.
I know, what do I know about shooting? And so what you get for all that, though, is a really, really, really easy to shoot trigger. And what you get out of that is you get a fantastic, you're going to shave 2/300ths of a second off your splits, which does not matter in real life. But if you're doing cool guy, like, hey, pins and coins and stuff, that helps. That is an advantage, period. Being able to run a bill drill, 0.2 of a second faster than the next guy just because the trigger on your gun, that is helpful, and the other thing you get, and one of the reasons I really landed on single actions again versus, let's say, like a really light striker gun, is, other than the safety and reholstering, is I thought about that grocery store mass shooting in New York not long ago, a couple of years back now. And there was a concealed carrier there, and he engaged, but the guy was at like 20 yards or something and had a long gun. And I just really started thinking, okay, guy with body armor and a long gun 20 yards away, what handgun do I want? And I realized what I wanted is a 2011 with a dot on it, because a 2011 with a dot on it, like if I'm in a grossly unfair fight, that's the handgun I can shoot better than any other. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to afford the guns, and so I don't have any kids, so it makes it, I've got I get the means to do it. And so, I thought it'd be fun for a while, and I'll never lose money selling them later, so it doesn't really matter. And so I've been going that route, but I would not say, oh, you have to, bro. If you're not shooting this, you're dumb. Or like, no, like it's an affectation. But are they really nice guns? Yes. Has Staccato really kind of like made a relatively affordable 2011 that runs good enough that I would trust one? Yes, absolutely. They're good guns, and they fix the mags, and the mags are always the problem. Between their mags and the MBX mags, they're pretty reliable now. So I mean, I'm satisfied with them. I carry them. You know, I'm comfortable with them.
So Kurt, that you just kind of started alluding to what I was going to ask. So along with the single stacks and just the whole night, because I mean, really, all a Staccato is, or any of those, is a neck down magazine and a grip that holds it. Now, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but so is the Staccato kind of in that same realm where they can go down and you really should have a couple of them to switch in and out? Or I mean, what's your thought on that?
Buy a couple C2s, 2 or 3, and just go from there. Because I find the C2 really, if you're going to be carrying the thing, that's the one I want. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Saw that show. So you kind of just get the door, something else comes in. Sorry, guys, I'm slow on these crutches. So
That's fine,
Good, buddy.
I really think just a pair of C2s with Holosun 407Cs is really, I mean, I would just get the standard barrel, not the suppressor length barrel, and a pair of those. The 16 round mags that come with run great. And then I would get the 20
let me back
round
up. You're
standard.
saying the C2?
Yeah, get the C2, man. If you're going to actually carry it, get the C2. If it's just a fun gun, get the P and get the steel P, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to carry these things, I find the C2 is just enough smaller in the grip that it really, really helps. And the other problem with the Ps are if you take the mag well off, the mag release is so long that if I set the gun flat and I press on it, the mag will come out. Because the mag release length is long enough that won't happen with the mag well on. But if you remove the mag well to make it more concealable, now the mag release is kind of too long for it to be a nightstand gun or something. Like it just doesn't really function that purpose anymore. The C2 does not have that problem. You can lay the C2 flat and it'll be fine. The mag release is shorter on it, right? So I find if you're going to actually carry these things and you have any kind of restrictive dress code at all, the C2 is just the right answer. And they run and they're good. You get the 16 round mags they come with, and then you get some of the 20 round mags, and then you put the 10-8 performance lower on them, base pad, and that'll make the 20 round mags fit in the C2. So for your stendos, you got 20 rounders. For your carry mag, you got 16 rounders. And that's plenty of ammo in a very, very reliable, shootable package. Because what you're really trying to get out of the 2011, like, yeah, if it's heavier, that's nice. If the barrel's a little longer, that's nice. But what you're really trying to get is that trigger, and the C2 has that trigger. So I find the C2 to be a really, really good gun. Like and also at $2,500 for a gun isn't cheap, but compared to like a true custom 2011, that's half or less what you're going to spend on those. And so if something is going to end up, let's say, in an evidence locker or whatever, like you can just write off a C2. You don't necessarily want to write off a Nighthawk or something, which
yeah,
whatever. I mean, if it gets you through it, it's fine.
Yeah, I saw the price on that Nighthawk and I was like, okay, that's a bit out of my budget. For
It's an affectation. Just get the C2. The C2's fine.
Like, yeah, the C2 definitely. I don't think I would need anything else other than that. I'm always probably going to shoot Glocks for carry and because yes, I'm real comfortable with them and have a safe full of parts, etc. But
yep,
yeah. So
and they're so simple. I can work on them, which is great. You know what I mean? like there's not much going on in there. As long as you don't deviate too much, don't mess with the springs too much, you're going to be just fine.
And you're talking Glocks now, right?
Yeah. So Glocks, I mean, I'll tell you, my recipe for Glock at this point is a CHPWS plate, irons of your choice, dot of your choice, a minus connector and factory minus connector, and that's it. You're done. Oh, and then a bore sight competition package. I wouldn't even, really the competition package is getting you most of what you want. And then you're done. And that's not a huge, put a 407C on there and the CHPWS irons, CHPWS plate. You're only $1,000 into that gun, maybe $1,200 of the bore sight package. You're $1,200 into that gun, and you have a very capable Glock 19, Glock 17 at that point. You know what I mean?
Good recommendation. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we've got a couple of questions, boy, I'd like to ask, but man, I think we're at the time where we need to let you go, Kirk. Now, Eric, do you have anything else to add, buddy?
Yeah, man, I'm good, man. This has been a real fun conversation for certain.
Yeah, Kirk, so FYI, and one of the most important questions we don't have time for, but so we will have you back again and get to ask you that question, but also it'll be fun. Maybe we can have you back on after TacCon so we can recount our stories, etc.
I will see you there, and I'd love to be back. It was great talking with y'all. I really appreciate your time tonight. I hope I can get my camera fixed by then.
Cool.
Sounds
no
good,
problem, buddy. Great
Have
talking with you, bud.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Looking for something